May on the railway line between Magdeburg and Halberstadt. The train travels on an embankment raised above the surrounding landscape. And that's exactly right, exactly perfect, because the rapeseed fields below appear even larger, even more boundless, even more like a glowing, radiant ocean of brilliant, intense yellow. You sit at the window, your head leaning against the glass, and your gaze keeps being drawn downward into this endless, overwhelming yellow abundance. The yellow isn't simply yellow, not monochrome or one-dimensional or flat. It's a yellow that reveals itself layer by layer, that shows what it means to be a color, a yellow with infinite depth and mystery and complexity and life. At the edges, where the intense, warm sun strikes directly on the upper tips of the flower roofs, it's a bright, almost whitish, silvery yellow, radiant and pure, and almost painfully brilliant in its purity, its strength. Deeper into the fields, where the thick, fleshy rapeseed flowers stand densely packed, shading each other, the yellow grows warmer, honey-colored, a soft, warm, golden tone that seems to breathe time and warmth and ripeness and life and strength. Right at the bottom, where you can only make out individual thick stalks and dark green leaves, where the sun doesn't really penetrate, the yellow mixes with green, and something emerges in between, something new, a color that has no real name, a soft, diffuse, mysterious yellow-green that looks like the color of hope, like the color of life itself. The rapeseed fields are so broad and so endless that they determine and control the entire horizons. The train travels straight, endlessly straight, on this high old embankment, and left and right, the yellow stretches to the furthest hills, to where sky begins and earth ends, and a new world starts. The sky is light, almost white near the horizon, sometimes slightly blue, and the yellow disappears into it very gently, a seamless transition without sharp boundary, as though the rapeseed fields grew to the sky, as though earth imperceptibly transformed into air, as though the two elements melted into each other, became one. You close your eyes for a moment and open them slowly again, carefully, as though the yellow might blind you, as though the intensity were too much. The yellow is still there, even more intense than before, even more present, even more overwhelming. It's as though this color burns itself into your consciousness, as though it penetrated not just through your eyes, but through your whole skin, your whole being, your whole soul and essence. You wonder if the other passengers in the compartment feel this too, this almost transcendent, almost spiritual effect of this color. But when you look around, most are occupied with themselves, reading books or newspapers, sleeping or dozing, staring at phones and screens, lost in their digital worlds. Only you and an older woman 2 rows ahead look out at this incredible, overwhelming sight. And she has the same dreamy, enchanted, transported look you probably do. The look of someone who isn't here, but somewhere else, in another world, in another state of consciousness. The scent comes through the window, even though it's firmly closed and sealed, as though the air itself simply carries the aroma of rapeseed flowers, as though the air itself gradually becomes yellow. The smell is peculiar and intense, something herbal and green in it, something earthy, but also something almost sulphurous or mineral that feels in the back of your throat and triggers a strange, not unpleasant, but very intense sensation. It's not really unpleasant, not really repellent, but it's intense, present, unforgettable. Something you can never remove from your life once you've breathed it, once you've taken it in. You breathe in deeper, try to truly grasp the scent, to store it in your memory. But scent is so fleeting, so hard to grasp, so impossible to hold. The train's rhythm on the embankment is a bit different, a bit strange compared to normal tracks. The embankment is old, older than you, probably older than your grandparents, older than most things in your life, older than your memories. The rails have a different feel, a different sound, a different rhythm and quality. The train vibrates differently, more regularly, more evenly, almost meditatively, almost like a heartbeat. And the elevation, the fact that you're high on this embankment, heightens the isolation. The feeling that you're floating above the world, above this sea of yellow, separated from normal reality, separated from your normal life. You're neither really in the field, nor really above it. You're in an in-between realm, a borderland, a transition between two worlds, two existences. Right at the bottom, on the embankment sides, on the green slopes, wild plants grow. Dandelions and other delicate little flowers. Small white and pink spots against the deep green of grass and weeds. These wild plants are like small witnesses, small rebels, not belonging in the great industrial rapeseed fields, yet still there, still growing, still blooming, still living their own lives, still existing in this space. You watch how the train constantly changes the perspective, how the landscape changes with every second, every rotation of the wheels. Straight ahead, the field is uniform, endless, hypnotic. But when you look back, it seems the yellow towers up before you like a mountain of yellow, as though the perspective were playing a trick, as though the rapeseed fields grew larger behind you whilst you pass. Ahead, the yellow is everywhere, 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 endless to the horizon and beyond. There are moments when you completely forget about the train, when you forget the ordinariness of your existence, when you forget yourself. It's as though the world consists of yellow, as though you're not riding in a train but slowly flying through this yellow, moving through it, becoming part of it, merging with it. Then the train jolts over a switch or crossing, and you're torn back into harsh reality, back into the hard upholstery of your seat, back into the noise and vibration of the rails. You wonder how much longer these vast rapeseed fields will grow, how long they'll remain in this full, perfect bloom. Until June? July? When will they be harvested and processed into oil? You know rapeseed is grown for oil and other products, that what you're seeing is an economic product, a commodity, raw material, not just a beautiful color for dreaming train passengers. But right now, in this moment, in May, with the train on this raised embankment, it's only yellow, only color, only pure beauty. The sun is higher now, higher than a quarter hour ago. You notice the warmth in your compartment increasing, the windows slowly beginning to fog. Another passenger opens his window wide, and a strong, warm wind comes in. A warm air current, and the intense rapeseed scent grows stronger, even more intense. And you breathe it in, this peculiar smell that reeks of earth and sun and life and strength and fertility and ripened nature. The train still travels straight on its embankment. The yellow doesn't stop. It's as though the world consists of nothing else, nothing but this yellow and this steady, rhythmic movement. You very slowly lean your face against the cool window, and the intense rapeseed scent envelops you completely, penetrates you, and your consciousness slowly grows cloudy and weaker, slowly becomes yellow, slowly becomes diffuse and flowing. There's a moment when you wake and don't notice you've fallen asleep. The train is still on the embankment, the rapeseed fields are still yellow, and it could have been a minute, or 10 minutes, or a whole hour. Time has no meaning anymore, no weight, no reality. The train travels on, carries you further, deeper into the yellow, and you don't even make the attempt to stay awake anymore. Don't even make the effort to keep your eyes open. Your head nods to the side. Your consciousness grows weaker and ever more diffuse. The boundary between reality and dream grows ever more permeable and almost completely disappears. The yellow of the rapeseed fields becomes yellow in your head, becomes a dream of warmth and infinity, and you glide, very gently and without resistance, down into sleep, carried by this endless sea of glowing golden color. Close your eyes if you'd like. Now I'm going to tell you about willows, about reeds, about baskets, and about a man whose hands tamed nature's most flexible material. The train from Vienna to Neusiedl travels through flat, soft land that grows ever greener as you approach the water. Lake Neusiedl is a shallow, gentle body of water, calming, surrounded by endless reeds and wild willows, a place that seems timeless, enchanted by time itself. On one of those glowingly hot summer days, when the air itself seemed to shimmer like silk, an old man sat across from me, whose hands were like gnarled branches, knotty and full of life. His name was Franz, and he was a willow weaver, one of the great masters. Franz was one of the last, truly one of the very last, still practicing this ancient craft. Weaving baskets, fish traps, cages for fish and birds, even complex furniture sometimes, all from flexible reeds and bending willows. It was a craft, Franz said in a quiet, respectful voice that went back to Celtic times. His family had been doing it for at least 400 years, probably much longer, perhaps over 1,000. He opened his small, worn rucksack and showed me a tiny, beautifully woven bowl, no larger than a large walnut. It was perfect, absolutely perfect. Every single fiber sat exactly where it should, nothing exaggerated or insufficient. "That is my amulet," Franz said reverently. "My great-grandfather wove it 150 years ago. I was born with it, and when I die, It will be passed to someone else. Hopefully, someone who understands. Franz told me about his life by the lake, a life by the water, a life close to nature. He lived in a white, very old village cottage with a thatched roof, directly next to a huge, weathered wooden shed where he worked. The shed was full of willows and reeds in large, carefully ordered bundles at various stages of drying. That was his material, his raw material, his entire wealth. The reeds came from the lake itself, from the rich, reedy shores. He cut it in autumn when it was ripe, golden and brittle, and dried it carefully over the long, cold winter in special hand-built stands. The willows he cut from the trees on the shore, from special trees, but not haphazardly or uncontrolled. He knew which trees produced the best, most flexible willows, which needed to be cut at what season for best quality, how to steam them and make them gracefully flexible. In spring, young willow shoots soaked in large water vats until they were flexible enough for weaving. Franz could work for hours, concentrated, weaving the thin willow rods together so quickly and surely it looked like a dance, like choreography. A large basket, a really large, beautiful basket, took many long days to finish completely. Franz first created a stable frame with thicker, more flexible rods, which he bent very carefully and bound with old knots. Then came the truly demanding, complex weaving, the actual craft that separated true masters from mere beginners. The rods had to sit firmly enough, but not so tightly they'd break or get damaged. Every gap, every opening had to be perfect, regular, and aesthetically pleasing. The shape should be beautiful, practical, of course, functional for its purpose, but also beautiful, artistically lovely to look at. Fish traps were even more complicated, requiring far more knowledge. These were special baskets that went into the water with fish going in, but unable to come out. Franz made these with a special, unique opening at the top, a funnel-shaped entrance made from tight reeds. A fish that had swum in couldn't get out. It was caught. Franz was proud of these traps, very proud. They didn't just catch fish reliably, they were also beautiful to see. Genuine, crafted masterpieces worthy of a museum. The summer days by the lake, Franz told me with great love in his voice, were wonderful for working. The air was warm and gentle, not the oppressive heat of the plain, not so crushing. The reeds moved in the light breeze like a mass of dancing silver, quite magical. You could smell the lake, fresh and green and alive, mingled with the scent of dry hay from distant meadows and the fine, oily aroma of the sunflower oil mill, kilometers away, but still noticeable. Sometimes the great white storks came down to the lake and stood motionless on the high church spires of the small villages. Franz watched them whilst he worked, observed them. They were, he thought, his companions, his silent brothers. They too had an old, noble craft, the craft of life itself. And they practiced it with the same calm sureness and dignity as he practiced his. Franz sold his beautiful baskets and complex fish traps to good traditional restaurants by the lake, to discerning garden centers, to museums, and to private collectors of taste. He didn't earn much money for it, that was true, but enough to live on, enough to survive. People sought his craft, yes, the better people, the clever ones. They knew deeply that what he made was genuine, authentic, that it required years and years of time, that it needed generations of knowledge, that it couldn't be machine-made, couldn't be done with efficiency. As the train approached Neusiedl, early evening was coming on. The sun slowly descended over the lake, and the water became gold and red and orange, all the warm colors. Franz leaned his head back and breathed deeply, calmly. "That is all I need," he said quietly, full of contentment. "The lake, the willows, my work every day, and the deep certainty that I'm making something that matters. That's enough." I asked him if it was difficult working entirely alone, without an apprentice, without a visible heir, without someone to pass things to. He shrugged thoughtfully. "Difficult?" he asked in return. "No, not really. I'm not alone. The lake is my companion, daily. The willows are my companion, also daily. And the long history of my family, hundreds of years, is always with me, in my hands." Franz also spoke openly about the greater ambitions he'd never truly had. He could have built a large, noisy factory, hired dozens of workers, produced baskets in great, monotonous quantities. But that would have taken the heart out of the genuine craft, would have destroyed it. There was something magical, truly magical, about the slow, deliberate making, about the unique relationship between the old master weaver and his material. You couldn't put that into a noisy factory, couldn't pack it into machines. Life was simple, but it was rich, rich in meaning. The people who came to him, they understood that. They didn't simply buy a basket. They bought a piece of history, a piece of love, a piece of time that Franz had put into each piece. And that was worth more than all the machines in the world. When we arrived in Neusiedl, that small town by the water, Franz rose slowly and carefully. He took his small, worn rucksack. Before he stepped down, he placed the tiny, perfectly woven bowl into my hand, delicate and fragile. "Take this," he said in a warm, old voice. "It will remind you that there are still people who work slowly and patiently. People who understand that the world doesn't have to be fast, that quality needs time. The lake will always be. The willows will always be. And as long as there are still people like me, the old weaving will also always be, in the hands of those who can still listen." And the landscape outside grew softer. The tree lines dissolved. The fields became dark areas across which the moon occasionally slid its pale light. I felt my breathing slow, felt my heart slow, felt my whole body sink downward into the warm embrace of the seat cushion, into the warm embrace of this train, carrying me without my having to do anything at all. It was a good feeling, a rare feeling, to be carried without effort, simply trusting that the wheels keep turning, that the tracks lead on, that morning will come eventually. My eyes grew heavy, so heavy. as though someone had gently laid a warm hand on my eyelids and said, "Now it's good. Now it's enough for today." And I heard the train, ta-dum, ta-dum, and I heard the soft breathing of another traveler already asleep, and I heard the distant rush of wind at the window panes, and all these sounds were like a gentle blanket laid over me, layer by layer, warmth by warmth, until I felt nothing but the quiet glide of the train through the night. It was many years ago. I can't say how many. Time becomes confusing when you're remembering something beautiful. The autumn came early, and I boarded the Centovalli train, the little narrow-gauge railway that runs from Locarno to Domodossola, through chestnut forests and the border between Switzerland and Italy. A border so gentle you barely feel it when you're on the train. It's as though you're sliding from one language into another without changing the words. I was alone, truly alone. Not the ordinary aloneness of someone sitting in a train. No, there were barely other passengers. It was midweek, an October morning, and the world seemed to be falling asleep. The chestnuts were falling. That's the first thing I remember, the sound of chestnuts on the roof of the train. They weren't all falling at once, but continuously, a rain of nuts and shells that clattered like little hooves on the train's metal. Tock, tock, tock. It was soothing. It was as though nature itself knew the rhythm of the train and moved with it. Outside, through the open windows, yes, we could open them, not like in the modern sealed trains, came autumn smells, damp earth, rotting leaves, the scent of chestnuts, not the nuts themselves, but the shell, the husk, what remains. And beneath that, underneath, something else, something watery, something quiet. The train climbed slowly through the forests. The narrow-gauge line wasn't fast, but it was faithful. It had known these mountains, these curves, these hairpin bends for 100 years. The body of the train was red and cream, colors that now, in that low October sun, looked like fire. I saw it in the window reflections. The train itself became fire. The train itself was part of autumn. And then, on the right side, on a curve where the forest opened for a moment, I saw it. A lake. It wasn't a large lake. It wasn't like the famous ones you find on maps with names people know. This was a small lake, a hidden lake, one that nestled in a hollow of the forest as if hiding from something. And the sun in that moment struck the water, and the water shone. It shone like liquid gold. Not white, not silver, but gold. A moment of perfect, unspeakably beautiful light. The water was still, unmoved by wind or time, simply there, waiting, glowing. And I couldn't see what lay beneath, whether the lake was shallow or infinitely deep. It was as though I wasn't looking at water, but at an opening in the earth, a window onto something other. I leaned from the window. That was foolish, probably unwise, but I had to get closer, had to catch this sight, had to keep it. The air was cool, and it smelled of forest and of that unknown lake. I couldn't see other people. Were there any at the lake? Huts, houses? I don't remember now. I see only the lake. I see the light. I see the train turning the curve and the window beginning to close, the forest coming back and the lake, my golden lake, vanishing. A second. That was all it was. A second, or 2 seconds, or perhaps 10. Time is peculiar when you see a window that opens only once. The train traveled on. The chestnuts continued falling. Tock, tock, tock. But something in me had changed. I'd seen something not on any map. I'd touched something, not with my hands, but with my eyes, with what's within me, that was older than maps, older than names. A lake without a name. A golden window that wouldn't open again. I've tried to find that lake. After that journey, years later, decades later, I've traveled this route many times, with maps, with guides, with other travelers. Nobody knew of a lake at that spot. "There's no lake here," the station master in Locarno said when I asked. "The lake is further south. That's the Verbano, the Lago Maggiore. You can't see that from this route." But I know what I saw. I know it with a certainty that matters more than facts. Perhaps it wasn't a real lake. Perhaps it was a reflection. Perhaps it was a moment when autumn showed its true color before vanishing again. Perhaps it was a dream that stole into reality, or reality that stole into a dream. It doesn't matter. The lake was real in the sense that counts. Real because I saw it. Real because the sight changed me. Real because it's traveled with me ever since. Every time I think of autumn. Every time I think of a train. Every time I see golden light. The train rattled on. The forest was dense, dense, dense. No other window opened. We glided from Switzerland into Italy, the border so gentle I didn't notice when we crossed it. The chestnuts continued falling, but more sparsely now. The tree had given its fruit. The longing of autumn was finished. Everything became restrained, still, waiting. I remember closing my window. The wind had grown too cold. My eyes were heavy. I was so tired, not from traveling, but from what I'd seen. It's exhausting to witness beauty. It's exhausting to see truth and not be able to hold it. I leaned my head against the window, not on the side where the lake had been, but the other window, and I closed my eyes. The chestnuts were still falling. Or no, perhaps it was only my dream making them fall. Tock, tock, tock. The sound became something else. It became the sound of water, the shimmer of light, the golden window opening and opening, and never again closing. I see the lake still, every night when I close my eyes. I see the light. I see the chestnuts falling like souls onto the train's roof. I see the border between two countries, the border between reality and dream, and I pass by it, and no one can tell me it wasn't real. The lake was real. The color was real. The window, that marvelous once only window, was as real as any lake on any map, and more real still because only I see it, because it exists only for me, because it is only for. You sit across from me in this dark compartment, and outside the lights of Dortmund rush past. The train glides gently towards Essen. I notice you're lost in thought. Your hands rest on your lap, and there's something in their stillness that makes me curious. What's occupying you? Tell me, I say quietly. You need a moment before you answer. Then you look down at your own hands. My mother, you say. I'm always thinking about her hands, her kitchen. That was her kingdom, you see. And I grew up in that kingdom, from childhood. I nod, and you begin to speak. My mother had hands that were always doing something. They weren't particularly elegant, or young, or beautiful by modern standards, but I've never loved any hands the way I loved hers. They were brown from gardening, and her nails were always short because they couldn't be anything else. On autumn days, when the air turned cool and the first rain came, I'd see her in the kitchen peeling apples. There was a certain rhythm to it, you understand. The knife moved almost of its own accord, and the peel came off in one long, thin strip. I sat on the old stool in the corner and watched her hands work. There was safety in that, a reliability that comforted me before I needed comfort. Her skin was rough from lie and heat, but when she touched me, it was soft. She could heal with her hands, truly heal. When I had fever, she'd lay a hand on my forehead, and the coolness of her palm meant I'd be well again. When I fell and my knee bled, her hands were the first to wash it. Tender gestures that showed me I was safe. She could speak with her eyes, but with her hands she wrote entire letters of love. The kitchen smelled of cinnamon and dough she was about to knead. She baked bread on Thursdays, always Thursday. It wasn't something chosen, it was simply so. Like a secret between her and the oven. She'd take flour in both hands, toss it into the big bowl, and it would fly up like snow. She'd laugh whilst doing it, though it was hard work. Her hands moved in the dough, kneaded it, worked it until it was smooth and fragrant. The dough was warm and alive under her fingers, and I saw something in her face like contentment. Like when you're doing exactly what you ought to be doing. She taught me later how to make bread, but my hands were never like hers. My bread never turned out so light, so perfect. She told me it wasn't technique, it was love. The dough has to know you love it. I didn't understand that, not really, until I had children of my own and started cooking for them. There was this one autumn, you continue, and your voice grows quieter. I was 13, maybe 14. I was suffering, one of those great teenage sorrows that feel like the end of the world. A boy, a friend, I can't remember exactly what it was, only that it felt like the world was falling apart. I sat in the kitchen crying, really crying. Not quiet tears, but desperate ones that distort your whole face. And my mother came in. She said nothing. Not a single word of comfort, no foolish talk of "you'll survive." She simply said, "Come, let's make something." She washed her hands and went to the window where apples from her tree were falling into baskets. She picked a few, the good ones, the beautiful ones, selecting each one carefully as though every apple mattered. And then she took out a pot and sugar and a vanilla pod she'd been saving for special occasions. She made apple compote. While she cut the apples into pieces smaller than usual, she talked about something quite ordinary, the weather, the house next door, Mrs. Müller who'd planted new roses, though her husband said they wouldn't grow. But Mrs. Müller knew roses better than her husband, my mother said. and now they're the loveliest roses on the street. Her hands worked, cutting the apples into even slices, and gradually my sorrow lifted. Not because the sorrow was gone, but because her hands showed me that life goes on, that you can cut apples even in the midst of pain, still add sugar, still create something beautiful. The pot sat on the fire, and the scent of apple and sugar filled the kitchen like a prayer, like a blessing. Apple steam rose, damp, warm, alive. It was the smell of normality, of hope, of the quiet certainty that there would be more days after this, and that those days could hold apple compote, that life wasn't over, that it would continue. She kept talking whilst she stirred, with calm, even movements. She spoke of her garden, of the blackberries that would soon be ripe, of the new warmth coming to the lake. Her voice was like her hands, reliable, steady, endless. And I understood what greatness was that I needed. Not big words, not dramatic gestures, but these quiet things, these everyday acts that said, the world goes on, you go on, we all go on. The best part, you say, and a smile shows in your eyes, was when she left her old kitchen and everything was tidy. She washed her hands, warm water running over her forearms, and dried them on an old cloth I still know, that I could smell if I closed my eyes. And then she took my hand, just like that, simply, but not hesitantly. She took my hand the way you take something precious, with full intention, with complete attention. She said, "Come, let's eat a little together." And we sat there, at her kitchen table, under the lamp that made warm light, and ate the still warm compote with a spoon. She gave me the first portion, and I tasted the apples, the sugar, the vanilla. But above all, I tasted her hands. It tasted like love, like safety, like everything will be all right. She watched me whilst I ate, with the spoon she'd given me, and said nothing, but her eyes said everything, without words, the way mothers can speak. They said, "You're not alone. This will pass. The world is still beautiful. The apples still grow. The sun will come again. Your heart will be light again. This is not the end. I promise you." And I believed her, because I saw she was right, that the apples were still there, that the sun would rise tomorrow, that there would be many more autumns, many more kitchens, many more apples to peel. You fall silent for a long time. The train rushes on. Outside, we're now in the darkness between Dortmund and Essen, and the windows show only blackness and occasional points of light from street lamps. Your eyes are half closed, and you're looking inward, into that past which lives so vividly within you that I can almost see it too. "That's it," you say finally, your voice barely a whisper now. "That's all. She's been gone a long time, many years, but I still see her hands before me every time I see my own. Those hands that didn't abandon me in my worst moments. Hands that showed me how to go on, how to live with pain and still create beauty, how to turn your sorrow into something sweet. I taught my own children the same thing later, in that same kitchen sometimes, or in other kitchens, but with the same movements, the same rhythm. And when I see my own hands now, when I look at my nails or when flour falls on my skin, I see hers too. They're immortal in my hands. I nod, and there's nothing more to say. The past doesn't sit behind us, I think. It sits in our hands. It lives in the movements we learned from those who loved us. And so we're made immortal, not through great deeds, but through the love we carry forward in simple, everyday gestures. A knife, flower, a hand reaching into the next hand. The train leaves Augsburg. You sit beside me, and the night is warm. One of those summer nights where you can feel the sun was never far away. The man across from me gazes at the rushing lights. After a while, he begins to smile, not at me, but inwardly. What amuses you? I ask quietly. He needs a moment. Then he looks up, and his eyes are awake despite the darkness. I'm seeing just a summer before me, he says. A particular summer. You notice he wants to tell you, so you wait. And slowly he begins. I was 19, he says, and back then there was this festival in our village. Every year on the same weekend in July, as if the sun itself had commanded it. Nothing grand, you understand. A village festival. A few stalls, some music, beer, sausages on the grill growing blacker with every minute old Herr Franzen left them in the fire. But for us, it was the greatest party in the world. The whole village came together, not from obligation, but because it was summer and the days were long and we were young and didn't know that youth has an end. The old folk sat on benches and drank and told stories we didn't hear. The young ran about, teased each other, tried to be cool, though cool was a concept nobody really understood. There was a big meadow behind the church, and every year, weeks beforehand, we'd start planning. We'd set up long wooden tables from the town hall and hung colored lights, small red, yellow, blue bulbs on wires that looked like a dream when it got dark. The vicar always helped, though he said the festival was too worldly. But he helped anyway, and his smile told us he understood that young people needed their celebrations. That particular summer, he continues, and his voice grows brighter, I'd just met Anya. Not really met her, you understand, but I'd noticed her, and being noticed by her was enough to change my whole life. She was from the city, visiting her grandmother for the summer. Just a few weeks, but those weeks seemed endless. She had these dark hair she was always brushing from her face, a gesture I'd later imitate 1,000 times when I was alone. And when she laughed, it was loud and real, unpolished, uncontrolled. Not the polite, restrained laugh of girls from our village who'd learned to laugh with lowered eyes. She laughed as if the world belonged to her. I was in love the way only 19-year-old boys can be in love. Crazy, hopeless, desperate, utterly without hope of rescue. I knew she'd be at the festival. The whole village would be at the festival. The odds were infinite. My mother asked me why I was taking so long to get dressed. I put on a shirt I'd just bought only for this occasion. So I set out that evening, and my heart hammered like mad, like a bird trying to escape a trap. My friends laughed at me, you see. They knew I was nervous, and it was mercilessly funny to them. And I was nervous. So nervous I didn't know what to do with my hands. I played with my fingernails, rubbed my face, picked at my shirt, anything to distract myself from the fact that she might not be there, or might be there and not see me, or might see me and look uninterested. The night was like this one, the man says, and his voice grows tender. Warm, fragrant, full of life. Everywhere the colored lights we'd hung glowed, and now they truly looked magical. Not like colored bulbs, but like dreams becoming visible. A band played, 3 men with guitar, accordion, and drums. Very badly, if I'm honest. The accordionist was always off-key. But back then, I thought it was the best music I'd ever heard. The music wasn't what mattered. People stood everywhere, laughed, chatted, and everywhere smelled of grill and beer, and of the earth still warm from heat, of summer itself. I searched for Anya but couldn't find her. I was almost in despair, blaming myself for arriving late. And then I saw her, standing by a stall where you could buy raffle tickets. She wore a dress that was blue, or perhaps green. I can't remember exactly, only that it was the right color, the color that belonged to her. She saw me before I could say anything. She saw me, and her face changed. A smile appeared that was only from me. That was all, a smile. And my whole world was remade. I went to her slowly, tried to be cool, though cool was impossible. And I said something stupid, something about the festival, or the weather, or the raffle tickets. I can't remember, really. But she laughed, and then she said, "Come on, let's get something to drink." And I was the happiest person in the world. We spent the whole evening together. We went around the stalls, played games with rings, which I naturally lost. First time, second time, third time. And she laughed every time, not at me, but with me, as though we were sharing a secret we both understood. We sat on a bench and watched the band, which was still terrible, but now that was charming. She leaned her head against my shoulder, and I barely dared to breathe. The whole village was there, hundreds of people with their own stories, their own evenings. But there was only us two. The world had stopped existing, except for her and me. Towards the end of the night, maybe midnight or later, she danced with me. The band played something romantic, something slow, and on the meadow, a few people were dancing, mostly old couples, showing how you dance together when you've been together for decades. And she simply pulled me onto the meadow, said nothing, took my hand and pulled. I couldn't dance. I was stiff as a wooden figure, all grace gone from my body, all coordination dissolved. But she laughed, and the laugh wasn't mean. It was loving, encouraging. She showed me how to move. She placed her other hand on my shoulder, and I felt the warmth of her hand through my shirt. An anchor, a promise. And then, slowly, gradually, I began to move. The music led me, but more than that, she led me. We danced under the colored lights, red, yellow, blue, that colored our skin, under stars that seemed infinite and eternal. And the whole world slowly turned, no longer around the band, no longer around the villagers, but around this one night, this one love, this one possibility. That was all, the man says now, and his voice is very soft, almost as though he's speaking to himself, speaking to the past. It was one night, a single night under lights with a girl from the city, a girl who couldn't stay, didn't want to stay. She left the next day by bus, back to the city, to a world bigger than our village. She waved from the bus window, and I watched her grow smaller, farther away, until she was gone. We saw each other once or twice in the weeks that followed, before summer ended, before September came with its cooler nights. But it wasn't the same. The magic was gone. She had a boyfriend in the city, or one developed again. She wouldn't stay in our village, and I wouldn't leave. I was too young, too rooted, too immovable. That was simply how it was. That was the end. That wasn't the point of the story. The point is, there was this one night when I was young and loved, or believed I was loved, and when everything seemed possible. When the music was bad, and it was wonderful because she was there. When I danced under colored lights and didn't have to think, didn't look to the future, didn't dwell on the past. When I was simply there, completely present, completely alive, completely real. I could say it wasn't real, that I remember the festival differently later, that my memory beautified it, romanticized the night. But that's not true. It was real. It is real. It still lives in me, this festival, this night, these lights. They haven't faded. And more than that, the memory of the version of myself I was that night lives in me too. A boy who could dance because a woman led him. A boy who had courage because someone believed in him. I'm not that person anymore, but I was once. And the world remembers. The man closes his eyes. The train glides on towards Memmingen. I think we have so few moments that truly shape us. Moments where everything is perfect, if only for an instant. Not perfect as the world might have been, but perfect as life itself gives it to us. And we carry these moments with us everywhere, like lights shining on within us, decades later, on a dark train. Hanover lies behind us. Spring is still young, and outside I see green fields just waking up. The woman sits at the window, her forehead leaning against the glass. She gazes at the landscape, and I notice something working within her. You're thinking of something specific, I say. She nods without turning her face from the window. Yes, she says. I'm seeing the house right now, our summer house. There's a linden tree by the lake, and I'm lying beneath it. It was a small house, she continues, her voice awake now, alive. More of a cottage, really, but for me it was a castle, a magical realm. My parents bought it when I was 5, with money they'd saved over years. A wreck at first glance, a roof that leaked, a chimney that never drew properly, windows that rattled when the wind came, the stairs creaked dangerously. But it was the best house in the world because it was ours. It sat right by the lake, and there was this old linden tree whose roots were like furniture, split, twisted roots you could sit on or lie on. You could even fall asleep in the roots. And underneath was always cool and mysterious, and you couldn't see the world. Every summer we'd go there. My mother, my father, who drove an old BMW that always threatened to fall apart, and later my brother, who was nervous during the drive. We'd pack the car full of things we needed: food, bedding, my books. My mother always packed too much, my father said. But my mother said, it's better too much than too little. And then we'd set off. And already on the way, hundreds of kilometers away, I could see the house in my mind, as though it glowed there. I knew every centimeter of it, could describe it with my eyes closed, yet it always seemed new, as though it had grown during the time between summers.
There was this moment in the morning, she says, and her voice grows even quieter, as though afraid speaking loudly would destroy it. When I'd wake before the others, before my mother made sounds in the kitchen, before my father got up and read the newspaper. The light was special then, golden and soft like honey, coming through the windows we always left open so the lake air could drift in. The lake lay smooth as a mirror, reflecting the trees on the far side, and there was only silence and birdsong, endless, layered, a concert only the morning knew. I'd run outside, still in my pajamas, my bare feet cold on the grass, and sit under the linden. I sat on the roots, and above me was a green leaf roof, a roof of light and green, and I was completely alone in the world, utterly alone, utterly safe.
Sometimes I took a book with me, a novel my mother had given me, or a fairy tale book. Sometimes not. Sometimes I just sat there, thinking nothing, deliberately nothing, actively non-thinking. My brain was empty, beautifully empty, without thoughts or worries or the burden of knowledge. I felt the moss under my legs, soft as velvet, cool from the night and the lake's moisture. And I heard the water making little waves against the shore, a rhythm old as the world, older than my life, that would last longer than my life. Once or twice a swan came by, calm, dignified, its white plumage perfect, no feathers disarranged, as though it swam only for me, only to show me that grace existed, that beauty was simply nature. I didn't think then that these moments would matter, that I'd one day need them. I didn't think that one day this would be over, dissolved, sold, gone. I thought it simply was, always so, forever and ever, that I'd always be young and there would always be a lake and I could always sit under this linden before the world properly woke. That was childhood innocence, this feeling that what is now is forever. That certainty which later breaks. There was a year, the woman says, and her voice grows sadder, when we didn't go. My father was ill. Not fatally ill, but ill enough that there were no big trips, no worry about a leaking roof, no patience for the long drive. So we stayed in the city, in the flat, where the air didn't smell of lake. I was perhaps 13 or 14, old enough to sense something was wrong, but not old enough to truly understand. I missed the house so badly it hurt, a physical pain, like losing a homeland. I thought I'd never go there again. I thought the lake would forget me, the linden would forget me, the swan would seek someone else. But the following year, when my father was better, we went, and I ran straight to my linden, my heart racing, and I sat down, and it was exactly as before. The water, the birds, the light, golden, unchanged, as though time had stood still, as though the whole year hadn't happened. But I was older, my body was bigger, my arms longer. I saw the house with different eyes, eyes that could see it was falling apart. The paint peeled off like scabs. The step to the front door was dangerous, rotten. And I thought, how much longer will this last? How much longer? It was as though I suddenly knew that things end. It lasted a few more summers, she says. Then my parents sold it. They couldn't keep it any longer. The repairs were too expensive, the circumstances too difficult. And my brother and I were old enough not to need taking along anymore, old enough not to need what the house was. I was angry at them for it, you see. So young, so angry. I was just angry. They stole my paradise from me. That's how it felt. That's how it should have felt. Like someone stealing a piece of heaven. I never went back. I refused to. Even later, when I was grown up and would have understood. I thought sometimes I could go and look at the house, see who owned it now, how they'd changed it. But I didn't. I was afraid. Afraid everything was destroyed, that it wasn't like it was in my head anymore, that the beauty was gone. So I kept it as it was, preserved in my memory, under the linden, in the morning, golden and still, and entirely mine. She slowly turns away from the window, her eyes now moist. The train glides towards Cell, and outside the fields grow ever greener, and it's spring, and the world awakens. You know, she says, after all these years I've understood I didn't lose the house. That's the secret I'm telling you. It was never the house that mattered. It was never the roof or the windows. It was the time. The time I could sit under a linden, and all I needed was silence and light, and the feeling that the whole world was mine, that I was part of it. I haven't lost that. No one can take it from me. I carry it with me, everywhere, through my whole life. And when I'm tired or sad, I go back there, in my mind. I close my eyes, and I'm there again. And under the linden, it's still early summer, and I'm still young. And the lake is still smooth, and the swan comes by, and the world is perfect and whole, and I'm not alone. I close my eyes, just for a moment, I think, just for a moment. But then images come behind the lids, not clear images, just colors, soft colors, blue and gray and a little gold from the compartment lamp. And these colors mix into something that's no longer seeing, but not yet dream. The train continues, ta-dun, ta-dun, and each ta-dum is a little further away, as though the train isn't quite in the same space as me anymore, as though I'm already half elsewhere, half in that land where tiredness lives, where everything becomes simple. Trier has grown small and dark behind us. Winter still sits in the air, though it's March, and the windows are fogged from the cold night. The old man beside me has his eyes closed, but he isn't sleeping. His hands rest on his knees, and I see they're completely marked with spots and wrinkles. Artists' hands, hands that have worked. You paint, I say. He opens his eyes slowly and looks at me. Or, he says, I used to paint. It's long past, but the memory is fresh, always fresh. But you still think about it, I say quietly. He nods slowly, and as the train glides towards Koblenz, he begins to tell me. My first painting that I sold was a catastrophe, he says, and his face relaxes into a smile that shows time and love, that shows he's told this story many times and it never grows old. That's what people said anyway, but for me it was everything. I was 22 and I'd been painting for 6 years, since I was 16, since I understood I could speak through color in a way words never could. And nobody wanted my paintings. Nobody. I showed them everywhere, in the cafe where the owner was a merciful man and gave me wall space, in my friend's gallery, which was really just a room,
in every exhibition space that would have me, because God knows I needed confidence. But there was only silence, no response, no looks that truly saw. There was this one art teacher who told me during an exhibition that my colors were too wild, too turbulent, my forms too chaotic, too disordered. I should paint more appealingly, more accessible, more orderly. That would sell, he said. That would make the world understand. And I believed him because I was young and desperate. And then, one day, a woman came into the gallery. She came in, and I saw immediately that she was different. She wasn't young, not old. She was somehow timeless. She had grey hair tied in a knot, and her eyes were awake, very awake. Eyes that had seen much. She looked at my paintings, every single one, slowly, with complete attention, without saying anything, without making a sound. I was nervous. I stood in the corner and tried not to stare, but I stared. She moved from painting to painting, and I could see her eyes speaking, answering what I'd painted. After a long time, which felt like an eternity, she came to me. She said she very much liked one of these paintings. It wasn't my best work, you understand, not the one I loved most myself. It was one I didn't particularly like, one I'd almost hidden behind the others. It showed a forest, but the trees were all twisted as if they were dancing. The colors were wrong, too orange, too violet, not natural. It looked like a dream, a nightmare perhaps, not like a real forest, not like one the world would have recognized. But she said that's exactly what drew her, that it spoke to her, that it looked real, if not like the real world. Like the world looked inside her, she said. The inner world. She asked how much it costs, and I said a price I pulled from thin air because no one had ever paid me for a painting, because I didn't know what my work was worth. She paid without negotiating. She gave me the money, and I held the money in my hand, and I couldn't believe it was real. And then she carefully picked up the painting, with respect, and asked, "Where should I take it?" And I said, "I'll do that." I wrapped it carefully, reverently, and I took it to her home, to a place I didn't know, a place that would change my life. The house was old and beautiful, says the old artist, and I see his eyes still glow. Full of books and paintings on the walls, colors and light and life everywhere. She showed me where the painting should go, and she led me through the house, and we entered a room that looked like a studio, but it was her bedroom. There were easels, brushes, paints everywhere, canvases at various stages of completion. So she was an artist too. She was an artist. She told me later that she hadn't told me at first because she thought I was shy, and if she told me too quickly that she also painted, that she also spoke this language, I'd never talk to her again. We talked for a long time. I'd come only to hang the painting, to transport it, but we talked until midnight, until the night turned dark blue. She showed me her paintings, paintings much older than mine, years old, decades old, that she'd painted across a whole life, that she'd preserved. She told me she'd taught, that she'd married, that she'd had children, that she'd done everything else except what she loved most. Because that was a time when artists couldn't be artists until their children grew up and her husband died.
And then she was alone. Finally alone. And she started painting again. She showed me how to make a particular color, how to mix pigment with oil, how to work with light, how to draw a line that speaks truth, how to be honest in painting, even when the truth looks ugly or confusing. She bought 2 more paintings from me in the following years. 2 more paintings I painted with more confidence, because I knew there was someone who saw. And we became friends, good friends, deep friends. The kind of friends where age doesn't matter, where only art and truth and openness count. She taught me more about painting, about life, about love and loss, than any teacher I ever had in any school, any studio. She showed me her work, her earlier pieces from when she was young and later when she grew older. And I saw how art changes with life, how life shapes art. And that first painting, the painting with the twisted trees, the chaotic painting, the wild painting, hung in her bedroom for all her remaining years, not hidden, not in a corner, but on a wall where she could see it when she woke, when she was ready for sleep. She told me it helped her fall asleep because it showed the world doesn't need to be orderly to be beautiful, that chaos can be beautiful too, that the wild color I thought was a mistake was right, was necessary, was the truth. She died when I was 40. She died on a cold March morning, early, before the birds woke. And after her death, I went to her funeral, to that dark place, to that farewell, and I saw the painting. It still hung there, on the same wall, facing her bedroom window. The colors had faded a little, from light, from years, from time. But the painting was still just as crooked, just as twisted as always. The trees still just as wild, the dream still just as alive. A neighbor of the family told me later that the painting was part of her estate, that I could have it, that she'd left it to me in her will, that I should take it. But I said no, and I meant it. It belonged to her. It should stay with her, even if she was gone. That way I could carry her with me, but the painting could also hold her, wherever she is now. It was my gift to her in return. The old man closes his eyes again. His face is completely still. The first painting you sell is never your best. It's not the most important. What's important is that there's someone who sees what you see, who understands that truth is larger than beauty, who shows you that it's good to be different. That first painting wasn't good, but it led to her, and she led to who I really am. Würzburg has said goodbye, and we glide through November darkness. Autumn is almost over, and there's a coldness in the air that smells of winter coming, of snow to arrive. The old woman across from me wears a scarf, green, a soft green, disheveled by the wind, and she slowly folds it again and again on her lap. Over and over, folds and folds, a movement that's repetitive, that's soothing, that's comforting. You've been doing that, I remark quietly, since we left Würzburg. She looks at her hands and smiles, a smile showing love and sorrow together. Yes, she says. It calms me. It was his favorite movement. He always folded his newspaper like this, again and again. The newspaper he'd already read, he'd keep folding with quiet hands, as though he didn't know what to do with himself, but he needed the movement, the repetition, something familiar in his hands. "You miss him," I say quietly. "That's not quite right," she says slowly, her eyes fixed on the dark windows and the darkness outside. "I miss the time with him, the time we shared, the knowledge that he was there, that I'd wake in the morning and he was there. And tonight I'm thinking of our first dance. That was so long ago, so long that it feels like a dream. But a dream I've maybe dreamed 1,000 times, because I don't want to forget it, because I want it to stay with me forever." "I was 19, she continues, and her voice grows warmer, remembering. "Back then you wore long dresses to balls, heavy dresses you had to move like armor. And my mother bought me a dress that was green, like forest, like spring, like hope. I thought I was beautiful in that dress, the way all 19-year-old girls think the most important evening of their lives is happening, that everything's possible in that dress. There was a ball in a hotel that seemed like a palace to me then, with high ceilings and chandeliers. But it was just a hotel, you understand, with a big hall and tables and a small band, 4 musicians who weren't particularly good. I came with my parents. My father wore a suit that didn't fit, too tight across the shoulders, and my mother wore something in navy blue, very elegant, with white gloves. I was nervous. My heart was racing. I knew some boys there, but not well, just from school, just superficially. And my mother told me beforehand, "Don't commit yourself too quickly. There are plenty of fish in the sea." I thought that was silly back then, even stupid. But mothers are often wise, even when their wisdom sounds silly. "He wasn't my first date, not even my second," says the old woman, and there's a smile in her eyes, showing she loves the naivety of her youth. "But he was my first everything. You don't understand that when you're young. You think any boy could be the one. Any of them could be that person, the right one, the only one. But there's only one who's truly yours. And when you see him, you know it immediately. It's like God draws a line and everything else is dark, and only this one point is bright." I saw him before he saw me. He came in with friends, all in dark suits, all loud and lively. But he was different. He had this quiet look. He looked around as though he wanted to really see the room, not just superficially, not just chasing women. And then he saw me, and I saw him. That was all. That was enough. That was all I needed. He came to my table. My parents were talking to other people, so I was alone for a moment, and he saw that, and he came. He asked, "May I have this dance?" He wasn't cheeky or arrogant. He was polite, almost shy. He was even nervous, I saw later. But at the time, I only saw that he was there, and that he saw me, and that I existed only because he was looking at me. That's the secret, you understand. That's the secret of love. That someone looks at you that way. That you only then truly exist. I said yes, though I thought my heart would jump out of my chest. And he took my hand, and I felt his hand, warm and dry and sure. And we went to the dance floor. The band played a waltz, very classical, very old-fashioned. I could dance, my mother had taught me, but I was so nervous that my legs trembled, that my knees were weak. "And then we danced," says the widow, and her voice is very soft now, as though touched by an old love. And he was so confident, so calm, that my nervousness disappeared like snow in the sun. He led me, and I followed, and it was as though I'd always danced with him. It was as though my body already knew his body, had known it for years, in other lives. We didn't speak. We didn't need to speak. The song was all we needed. The waltz was all. After the dance, he brought me back to my parents, slowly, not hurrying, as though the night wouldn't end. And my father saw in my face that something had changed, that I was no longer the woman who'd arrived, that I was older, knowing, changed. My mother saw it too. She smiled with that mother's smile of those who understand that life is beginning. After that night, we saw each other constantly. We met in cafes, we went for walks, we danced in my living room to music on the radio. We found every chance to be together. And 2 years later, after 2 years of learning who this man was, of him learning who I was, we married. Not in that big hotel, but in our village church with family and friends. And after the wedding, after all the years, we danced our whole lives together. We had 60 years together, she says, and her voice grows calm, full of gratitude and longing. 60 years. That's longer than a whole other lifetime. We had children, 3 children, grandchildren, many grandchildren, problems, joys, years of routine and security, years of simply being together. It wasn't always a waltz, you understand, not always music and lights. There were times the music grew softer, or there was no music. There were times I danced alone when he was ill, and he stood at the edge watching, and his eyes danced for me. And there were times when he couldn't dance, when his legs were weak, and I led, and he trusted me, and we moved together. But it was always our dance, our rhythm, our story, the one we wrote together with every day, every year, every decade. Last year, on our 60th anniversary, he danced with me one more time. He was old and tired, very tired, and we were slow, and the rhythm wasn't like before. But his arm around my waist was still the same, strong and sure, and his look still saw me the same way, with that look from back then, with that look that told me I existed, that I mattered. After that night, 2 weeks later, he died, peacefully, in his sleep. He went, the memory of that dance still in his bones. The widow folds her scarf again and again. The train glides through darkness towards Aschaffenburg, and outside there are only the lights of night. There's a love, I think, that doesn't die when the person dies. There are dances we keep dancing, alone, forever. That first waltz was the most important, not because it was the first, but because it showed that 2 people can find together a rhythm larger than themselves. And that rhythm remains, in the hands, in the heart, in every fold of a scarf, in every memory. And somewhere in this dark landscape, I thought, other people sleep now in their beds, in their houses, and the moon looks down on them, and the moon looks down on us, and everything is in its place. The fields are in their place, the forests are in their place, the rivers are in their place, and I am in my place. Here in this carriage, here in this warm cradle of wood and cloth and metal, carrying me where I need to go, without my needing to be awake, without my needing to do anything but trust and rest. The train barely slows as you gaze through the windows at Werder. It's early April, and the orchards spread before you like an open book, a landscape stretching its entire white magnificence up to the sky. You lean your forehead against the cool train window, and the first impression is always this: a white, almost unreal flood, stretching endlessly between gentle hills, overwhelming you completely with its beauty. The cherry blossoms dominate everything, all other impressions. They cover the trees so densely and completely that you can barely see the dark wood of the trunks and thick branches beneath. It's as though someone has laid a vast snow blanket across the hills and all the valleys, but the light falling through and striking the bloom roofs from above is warm and golden, almost like liquid honey shining through. You don't count individual blossoms. That would be an impossible and unnecessary task. Instead, you take in the whole, this gigantic whiteness vibrating out there, as though glowing from within like the glass of a giant lantern. The train jolts slightly over a level crossing, and another passenger coughs 2 seats away, but it barely disturbs the deep peace into which you've sunk. The orchards pull your entire attention into their strong spell. Now, as you look longer and ever more attentively, the layers and complexity reveal themselves beneath the first white abundance. Not all trees bloom with equal intensity or timing. The older cherry trees, anchored deep with thick, dark brown, weathered trunks, carry the full weight of this white bloom load, their crowns arching outward under the burden of beauty, under the force of life. You recognize the characteristic shapes of some crowns, the style of trees that are decades old, perhaps 100 years or more. Beside them stand younger fruit trees, planted only a few years ago, their blossoms still more restrained and less overwhelming, their flower quantity smaller and more concentrated, but somehow more intensely white, as though they'd developed a kind of conviction to stand against the established giants of fruit cultivation. The apple trees differ distinctly and interestingly from their cherry neighbors. Their blossoms carry a delicate pink tone, a whisper of tender pink and soft cream white, like a murmur of color running through the otherwise predominantly white landscape. You try to distinguish them individually, to tell the pink patches from the white, but the train moves faster now, and the perspective keeps changing, and the colors blur together like watercolors. It's almost as though you're driving through an impressionist painting, where exact outlines matter than the overall impression, the feeling of movement and light, the sense of life in all its variations. The structure underneath becomes visible when you truly concentrate, when you squint and try to see behind the bloom's splendor into the order beneath. Between the great orchards, you recognize the paths, the narrow lanes and tracks where the pickers will work in autumn when the fruit is ripe and must be harvested. Now they're empty and still, just green grass with yellow and white spots of dandelions and daisies everywhere. Here and there stand small sheds and old storage houses of red brick, looking ancient, as though they've stood in this landscape for 100 years or much longer, supporting the agriculture. A fence of dark, weathered wood, almost black from weather and many years, runs through a few plots. Everything is orderly, thoughtful, methodically arranged. a system developed and perfected over generations of fruit farmers.
You notice how the silence of this blossom landscape gradually makes you still and quiet, how it exercises a kind of deep calm on your nervous system. It's as though this silence cleanses you, heals you, transforms you. There's no drama here, no wild colors or aggressive movements or loud sounds. Only this gentle explosiveness of life, this peaceful force of new life breaking forth after the long, dark winter. The cherry blossoms fall occasionally from the branches and are carried away by the wind. You can sense it through the subtle air movements, even if you can't see it clearly from the train window. But there's this hint of something ephemeral, something fleeting and transient that will remain only briefly before it withers and falls as petals to the ground. The people who work and live in this landscape aren't visible this afternoon. A dog barks somewhere in the distance, completely unmoved by this bloom beauty. A few old bicycles lean against a fence next to a red brick house. Agriculture is quiet when you look at it from outside, from the train passing by. You wonder how long the people here live and work to experience this transition between winter and spring, year after year. Whether they still truly see it, or whether it's become routine for them. Inside the compartment, it's warm and pleasant. The heating still runs, though it's mild outside and the sun shines. Another passenger has his window slightly open, and you can smell the air. Not loudly or clearly, but there's a hint of sweet bloom scent, mingled with the damp smell of awakening earth. It's almost sweet, but not in an obtrusive or too intense way. It's the smell of life awakening and stretching, of sap flowing again through branches and twigs. The train's rhythm becomes part of this entire perception. The steady, meditative rhythm of wheels over rails, the gentle rocking, and the train's continuous motion. All together create a kind of trance, a hypnotic quality that slowly lulls you. The blooming trees appear in the same rhythm. Forward, forward, the next image, the next. An endless succession of beauty slowly entering your bones and soul. You watch a couple of butterflies or bees flutter or buzz over the blossoms. Little bright color touches against white. Are they really butterflies, or just petals driven by the wind? You're no longer quite sure. The boundary between movement and stillness, between nature and your perception of nature, grows ever blurrier. There's a special, unforgettable moment where you look out your window up the hill toward an old farmstead. A couple of especially old cherry trees stand there, larger, older, and more dignified than all the others, with thick, twisted trunks, and they're like guardians over the whole land, like anchor points for all the order beneath. The blossoms glow golden in the afternoon light, as though burning from within. Behind them, the Havel can be sensed, broad and slow, silver in the light, flowing peacefully. The Werder orchards stretch to the water like an endless field of white beauty, as though the trees were blooming toward the river. You remember that Werder is famous for its fruit cultivation, and has been for centuries. That people here have been planting and tending fruit trees for centuries. That this soil, these hills, this special climate, the proximity to the Havel, altogether
is precisely right for cherry, apple, and pear trees to flourish. It's not by chance that this explosion of bloom happens just here, that this place flowers anew each year. It's a place where nature and human labor meet and create something perfect, something beautiful, something meaningful. The train picks up speed again. The hills move to the side, and already new houses are visible, suburbs, Brandenburg approaching. The spell of this landscape begins to slip away, but not really. You carry the images with you. You slowly lean back into your seat. The sun falls at a shallower angle through the window, and the warmth is welcome. You close your eyes slowly, but the images remain behind your eyelids. White on green, the train's rhythm, the gentle beauty of a landscape just awakening. And as the train travels toward Brandenburg, the blossoms slowly disappear into the past. But the peace they brought remains with you. This deep, warm peace that only spring can bring. The world outside slowly blurs, and you glide very gently into a sleep from which you'll carry the white splendor of the orchards for a long time to come. The train travels from Kassel towards Marburg, through a landscape you've seen 100 times, yet discover anew each time, as though it's appearing before your eyes for the first time. It's spring, and wherever there's a river or stream, there are willows, and on the willows hang delicate silvery catkins, like little secrets, like little treasures. You look out, and there's this long, narrow stream, and crowded densely on its green banks are willows with their fine, soft, gleaming catkins. The catkins are the first thing you see, what first draws your attention like a magnet. They hang from the willow branches like little ears, like delicate creatures just awakening and stretching. They're white and grey and brown and golden, all the colors of winter and spring mixed in one single, delicate, soft form. When the sun strikes them directly, they glow like little lights, becoming silver, pure, radiant light. When shadows fall over them from other trees, they become brown and grey. Darkness, mystery, something enigmatic. The catkins are the tree's most tender parts, the most sensitive, the first to dare appear, long before the leaves come, long before the tree breaks into its full splendor and strength. The stream itself is brown and fast and alive and energetic. The water flows quickly and forcefully because spring brings much water from the mountains, meltwater from the last lingering snow that melts and transforms into water. The stream isn't quiet, but it's not loud like a waterfall, rather a continuous rhythmic rushing, a soft murmur, a quiet sound that's almost inaudible under the train's noise, that you can miss. You try to hear it, and when you truly concentrate and turn inward, you can hear it. This quiet whisper and murmur of water flowing over smooth, round stones, encompassing them. You watch the stream appear and disappear again and again between the trees. The train doesn't follow it exactly, not directly beside it, but it keeps coming into view, then disappears again behind a row of trees, or a curve, or a rise. It's as though the stream is playing with you, playing hide and seek, saying, "See me, really look at me, I'm here." then hides again behind thick trees and bushes, retreating into its intimacy and secret. The willows aren't large or dominant in the landscape. They're more bushes than trees, growing wider than tall, but they're crowded densely together, a long whole row of them, all with their delicate, fine catkins. There are other trees here too, alders with their brown cones, other willow types, poplars probably. But the catkins are what you see, what you want to see, what attracts you like a magnet, what touches your heart, what fills your consciousness. The air smells of water and damp earth, and the green scent of the forest. The stream has its own atmosphere, a special moisture, a freshness, a vitality that you can feel even from a distance, that touches you, that fills you, even though you're not close enough to breathe it directly. The train travels fast, too fast, so you can't really see the fine details sharply, but you sense them, feel them. You know that below, by the stream, lush green grass grows, that there are insects, small creatures, that there is life, life just beginning, stretching, awakening, opening its eyes. The stream is a lifeline in this landscape. It connects everything. It connects the world. It flows ever onward, endlessly, never stops flowing, never stops wandering, never stops moving. And the willows on its banks are like guardians, like carers, like old friends of the water who have stood here for decades or centuries and accompanied the water, protected it, loved it. The catkins themselves are like little secrets, little riddles, little wonders. You wonder what's in them, what energy, what life, what strength, what hope. They're like spring's first thoughts, tender and full of hope and strength and possibility. They won't last long, won't remain long, won't exist long. In a few weeks the leaves will come and the catkins will be gone, forgotten, torn by the wind, fallen into the water. But now they're here, silver and golden in the light, in full splendor, in full beauty. You slowly lean your head against the cool window and look down at the stream and willows. The train travels faster now, and the scene passes you like a dream. But you try to hold it fast in your memory, to anchor it in your consciousness. The stream and willows and catkins, all together, all that exists for a brief, fleeting moment, and then is gone, past, away, vanished. There's a place where the stream makes a gentle curve and slows, becomes broader and calmer, almost becomes a quiet lake. And there, where the water is quieter, you can see the willows and their catkins reflected. The catkins reflect in the calm, clear water, double themselves, become something magical, something not quite real, something from a dream or memory or vision. The other passengers on the train don't look out. Not at this scene. Not at this beauty. They're in their own worlds, in their thoughts, phones, books, dreams. Only you look out. Only you see the stream and willows and silvery catkins. It's as though nature and the train and your consciousness merge in this moment. As though there's only this one point, this one place, this one spot where everything comes together. The stream flows on, endlessly, as streams do,
as life does, always flowing, always forward, always onward. It flows to the next village, the next forest, the next river, until it finally reaches the sea and mixes its water with it. But right now, right here, it's a quiet companion to the train, a quiet witness to this journey, these moments, this beauty. The willows are old. You can see it clearly in the thick, cracked bark, in the way they grow, in the way they gently bend toward the water, as though they love the water, as though they protect it. They've probably been here for decades, maybe generations, maybe since your grandfather's time or older. They're witnesses to this region, to these changes, to these years and decades that have passed. The train takes a curve, a gentle curve, and the stream and willows grow blurrier, less distinct, more diffuse, begin to disappear from your field of vision. It's as though nature is saying goodbye to you, gently releasing you. You try to hold your gaze on them longer, try not to lose sight of them, but it's futile, impossible. The train is stronger. The train pulls you onward. The train is a force you can't resist. The train travels further from the stream, and the willows disappear from sight, disappear behind the hills, behind new landscapes. But the images remain with you. The delicate silvery catkins, the brown lively water, the gentle rushing and whispering of the river. You close your eyes slowly, and the catkins are still there, silver and golden behind your eyelids, and the sound of the water is still there. A gentle whisper that lulls you, that gently leads you down into sleep, into a dream where the catkins still hang on the willows, where the stream still flows, where everything is still there, forever, eternally. The train entered a tunnel, and for a brief moment it was completely dark outside. Just the rushing sound, just the echo of the wheels on tunnel walls. Ta-dum, ta-dum. And then we emerged again, and the night received us as a mother receives her child back after a brief outing. I thought how beautiful that is. Tunnels and night, and tunnels again, and night again, and on and on and on. And eventually, you notice no difference between what's outside and what's inside, because everything flows together, because everything becomes one, because sleep is so near you can almost smell it. Dawn on the railway line from Regensburg to Ingolstadt hasn't quite fully broken, isn't quite there yet, as you slowly gaze out the train window into the unknown, misty world. The sky is dark grey, almost blue-black, still dark from the long, peaceful, deep night. And down on the great river flowing beneath the train, threading through the whole land, lies a dense, imperceptible, almost supernatural mist, like a thick blanket of water and air mingled. The mist is so impenetrable, so completely dense, so utterly opaque, that you can't really see where the water begins and where the mist ends, where the boundary lies between liquid and gas, where one world passes into the other. It's as though the river is trying to hide, as though it doesn't want to really be there, but would rather remain hidden in this dense, white, mysterious mist.
remain invisible forever.
The mist isn't cold, not really cold in the physical sense, but it looks cold, feels cold, grey and bleak and heavy and oppressive and sad and mysterious. It lies like a heavy velvet blanket of fine mist crystals over the water, like a protective, soothing hand embracing the river and silencing it. You can't see the water's surface, not directly, not the waves or the current, not the movement, not the light that might reflect from it. Only this impenetrable mist, this absolute obscurity, this deep secret that can't be revealed. Somewhere far below this mist, the water flows silently and powerfully. Somewhere under this thick blanket, the river moves with strength and weight, carries its great volume of water forward through the landscape, carries history onward, carries time onward. But you can't see it, can't really hear it, can only sense that it's there, that it flows, that it moves through the earth. The train travels slowly, very slowly, carefully, more carefully than before, as though it too were afraid of this mist, as though it didn't dare travel fast. The speed is noticeably reduced. The journey becomes a glide, a very slow, deliberate, almost hovering movement through this uncertainty and obscurity. You hear the train's horn, a long, bleak, deep tone that's penetrating and warning, that sounds hoarse. An acoustic warning to other trains, to all road users, to all living things hidden out there in the mist. An acoustic message of presence, of existence. The river's banks are barely visible, blurred, indistinct, vague, almost non-existent. There's a darker grey to your left and right, something that could be the banks, could be something else, could be an illusion, could be a deception of your mist-blinded eye. The trees are only shadows, only dark and diffuse outlines, shadows of trees, not really trees, not really recognizable, not really tangible. The world is reduced to shades of grey, to endless nuances of grey upon grey, to doubt, to uncertainty, to mystery, to another dimension, to something unreal and paradoxical. You notice how the cold and moisture slowly and steadily enter the compartment, penetrate it, force their way in. The mist has a temperature, a quality, a presence, a heaviness that you can feel, must feel, even though the windows are firmly closed, even though you're not in direct contact with it. It's as though the mist penetrates the thick windows, passes through the impermeable walls, seeps in everywhere, changes the entire air in the compartment, makes it more damp, denser, colder. There are other trains somewhere in the mist, somewhere out there in this complete obscurity and uncertainty. You can't see them, can't recognize them, but you can hear them, can sense their presence, can feel their nearness. The horn of another train sounds in the distance, muffled and dark and slow, and your train answers with its own horn, a long, penetrating tone. It's as though a conversation is taking place, a silent conversation in horn cries and signals, a real conversation between invisible trains, between machines, between locomotives moving in this opaque mist, warning each other, assuring each other that they're there, that they exist. The river is an important river, probably the Danube or one of its great, powerful tributaries.
A river with history and substance and meaning. You've read about this river, about its long history, about the cultures that lived on it, about the cities it flows through. You know from your geographical knowledge that beneath this impenetrable mist, beneath this wall of grey, great quantities of water flow, that this river has a force, a power, an incredible presence and strength. But right now, in this dense, opaque mist, everything seems calm, still and quiet, and hidden and secret, concealed from the world and from view. There's a moment, a specific moment, when the train crosses a bridge, travels over the river, almost flies over the water, and you feel the slight, gentle change in the journey, the subtle change in the train's rhythm and movement. Your body senses the change, though your consciousness is almost asleep. You strain hard to see something, to recognize something beneath the mist, something on the water, some detail, some sign, some proof. But there's nothing to see. Absolutely nothing. Only this impenetrable, grey, opaque veil that conceals everything. The air smells of water, of intense moisture, and of earth and damp forest and mystery and the past. It's a scent that's ancient, thousands of years old, a scent that's outlasted cultures and ages. It's a scent you know, that you like, the scent of rivers and lakes and mists and damp mornings and beginnings and new life. It's not unpleasant, not repellent, but rather soothing and relaxing, calming like an old familiar song, as though this scent is telling you, it's okay, it's okay. Here is water, here is life. Everything is fine, despite the mist, despite the uncertainty. The mist begins very slowly to lift, to yield, to give. It's not sudden, not dramatic, not even very noticeable at first, but it's there. It's present. It's happened. It's real and genuine. The sky becomes a little brighter, very slowly, very gradually, very gently, and the mist becomes a little more transparent, a little less dense. You can now very vaguely, very faintly and diffusely see the far bank of the river. Dark and blurred and indistinct, but it's there. There's something. There's a presence. There's the world. The sun tries to come through, tries to break through the mist, tries to show its strength. You can feel it before you can see it, before you become aware of it. There's a warmth that wasn't there before, a new energy, a hope, a deep hope that the day will actually come, that light will penetrate, that the mist will yield. The train travels faster now, travels with more confidence and courage. The mist no longer holds it back as before. The rhythm changes again, becomes livelier, becomes normal and familiar again. The river seems to be saying goodbye, seems to say, very well, travel on, continue your journey. The darkness is past. But the mist remains with you, remains in your consciousness, remains in your heart. And as the train speeds up again and the landscape becomes clearer again, you slowly sink into a dream, a gentle dream of mists and rivers and invisible things. The shades of grey become a kind of soothing for you, a mantra pulling you into sleep. A deep sleep, as grey and peaceful as this mist. A sleep full of mystery and comfort and peace and rest. And so we travelled on, the train and I and the few other travellers sitting with me in the compartment or in the neighbouring ones, each in their own small corner of the world, each on their own path into sleep. The carriage's warmth, the quiet crackle of the heating, the clacking of wheels on the rails, all of it became a shared song, a song without words, a song that carries and soothes and says, "You may let go now. You may rest now. The train travels on for you. Time travels on for you. The world takes care of itself whilst you sleep." And the landscape outside grew softer. The tree outlines dissolved. The fields became dark areas across which the moon occasionally slid its pale light. I felt my breathing slow, felt my heart slow, felt my whole body sink downward into the warm embrace of the seat cushion, into the warm embrace of this train, carrying me without my having to do anything at all. It was a good feeling, a rare feeling, to be carried without effort, simply trusting that the wheels keep turning, that the rails lead on, that morning will come eventually.